today is deadline day for the franchise tag application. Nobody was messing around yesterday. It's like, hey, we're back from the combine. We're not taking any chances. Let's go ahead and apply these tags. And there were a rash of tags applied on Monday. 5 in all, to go with the one that already was applied last week to kicker Robbie Gould. 5 defensive linemen / linebackers. There's going to be a fight, I think, between a couple of these guys and their teams regarding whether they're defensive ends, which is a higher franchise tender, or linebackers, which is lower. But Demarcus Lawrence, Jadeveon Clowney, Grady Jarrett, Frank Clark, Dee Ford, all tagged on Monday. And Chris, it's no surprise because the hierarchy in the NFL is quarterback, pass rusher.
Yes.
The two most important positions on the field. And when you have a good pass rusher, you don't let him hit the open market.
No, you don't let him hit the open market, or if they have the potential to be that game-changing pass rusher for the next few years and you're still not quite sure. Let's say like a Dee Ford, right? Where, yes, there's been injuries through his career. Last year, he kind of pops onto the scene. I know 2010, he showed a little glimmer there as well, getting 10 sacks. But everything else has been too few and far between, along with injuries. But the pass rushing position and some of these guys that we saw yesterday, these are versatile guys that can do different things for your defense. And in this day and age of multiplicity, where offenses can be in a running set one play and the next set they're in the shotgun with no back in the backfield, you got to have these type of players who can make game-changing plays and do different things for your defense. And I think that's what you saw with the franchise tag yesterday. These are all, four of those guys are under that category.
All right, and let's look at all of the guys who were tagged yesterday. And let's go ahead and throw Robbie Gould in before we throw him back out.
Yeah, let's get him in there.
All due respect to Robbie Gould. Okay, which of these guys would you want, both for 1 year and for the long term?
Okay, I think to me, all right, the ones that jump out to me, the three, there's 3 here where I go into that conversation. There's 2 where
I didn't ask for 3.
You want
I
just
said
the one. Okay. If you ask me for one, I'm going to go with Frank Clark then right now. Frank Clark is the guy I look at up in Seattle who is not only a tone setter for the defense, but just like we just talked about, he's a guy that can come off the edge. He can get right in that 10 sacks per year per range. But at the same time, he's not just a pass rusher. He can do a lot of different things. He plays the run extremely well. It seems like he is the leader of the defense there in Seattle, making the comments, remember, earlier this year about, Richard Sherman's not here anymore. This is my defense now. I mean, those are signs of leadership, and he is a difference maker that can do a lot of different things along the defensive line and not just off the edge, put your hand down, pin your ears back, and rush the passer. He can play 3-technique defensive tackle and still hold his own in some of those matchups too. So that would be the one if you made me pick one.
Well, and here's the thing, too. I think he's the one of these guys most likely to do a long-term deal because I think that the Seahawks realize the significance of having him around over the long haul. And because they went through that process last year of clearing out older players that were consuming a ton of cap space, and this year Earl Thomas will be gone, they can afford to take a guy like a Frank Clark who will make $17.1 million this year under the franchise tag, and you take that number and you apply a 20% raise. That's his tag number next year. That becomes the loose formula for figuring out how much fully guaranteed money he gets at signing. It's not driven by the market. It's driven by that franchise tag. He'll be looking at about $40 million fully guaranteed over the first 2 years. They could put a deal together fairly quickly to get him signed long term. Now, here's the reality. July 15 is the deadline. It's a deadline-driven business. Typically, that's when those deals get done. But it wouldn't be all that hard if the Seahawks really want to do it to get a long-term deal done right now for Frank Clark. And I think of all those guys, he's the one that should get the long-term deal, and the Seahawks should be motivated to do it, Chris.
Yeah, I'm with you there all the way. I mean, he's a guy that is really just hitting the peak of his career as far as, physical tools and the mental tools that he's been taught here the first 4 or 5 years in the NFL. Now it's all going to come together to where, we're seeing a player in his prime who can take over certain moments of a game. Offenses have to adjust their game plans when they play a guy like Frank Clark and worry about matchups or who is he against, all of those things. But I think it's an interesting list, Mike, because I think out of the 5 guys, right, we talk about Frank Clark, Jadeveon Clowney, Demarcus Lawrence, Dee Ford, Grady Jarrett, right? Those are 5 difference-making guys on the defensive side of the ball. When I look at that there, I go Frank Clark, Demarcus Lawrence, Grady Jarrett. Those 3 right there, I think, are the most likely to where the teams are going to go, let's do our best to get a long-term deal done with these guys. We know what they are as players. There hasn't been much injury history. Let's try to get this done. Now, then there's the other 2 guys with Dee Ford and Jadeveon Clowney, right, where I would say this is a 1-year, prove it to me one more time that you can stay healthy and be productive. Dee Ford's been injured a lot and kind of been here and there as far as sack output. Jadeveon Clowney, the same thing, right, Mike? I mean, we know he had microfracture surgery. He's had issues with his knee, and I would be scared about giving him anything long-term guaranteed, a lot of lump sum money right up front. I know that.
Let's spin it back to Demarcus Lawrence. I think he gets lost in the shuffle because there's so many star players in Dallas. You got Jerry Jones, who sucks up a lot of oxygen out of the room for starters, but between Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott, these are all guys who need to be paid at some point. Demarcus Lawrence already has been tagged once. That means this year he gets that 20% bump to $20.56 million. And there are some complications here because even though he's been healthy, he needs shoulder surgery. And he said, I'm not getting the surgery until I get a long-term deal, which is a way to put pressure on the Cowboys to get that long-term deal. Because if they wait until July 15, like they did with Dez Bryant when he got his long-term deal back in 2015, by then you do the surgery. Are you going to be ready for the start of the regular season? So there's pressure on the Cowboys to do this. And Lawrence has the template that we saw last year with Le'Veon Bell. Because even though no one really knew how this worked until Le'Veon Bell sat out beyond the deadline for showing up at all in 2018, everybody now understands that if Lawrence would sit out the entire season, next year, if the Cowboys franchise tagged him again, it would be the average of the 5 highest paid quarterbacks from 2019 based on cap number, which means 26, 27 million or more for Demarcus Lawrence, which means next year he does what Le'Veon Bell's doing this year, straight to the market. So if he's willing to give up that $20.56 million, and people say, well, how can you do that? Here's how you do it. You know there's a hell of a lot more than $20.56 million out there.
Right.
If you can get to the open market, you stay healthy or you try to stay healthy. You've got the shoulder injury that you have to deal with. But if you say, I'm not playing at all in 2019, I'm going to the market next year, Le'Veon Bell, especially when we see what Le'Veon Bell gets next week, that could go a long way toward getting guys like Demarcus Lawrence to say, I'm going to sit out a whole year. And it used to be unthinkable, but I think it's becoming a weapon. You know, we hear so many complaints about the franchise tag, Chris.
Yes.
There are weapons for players to push back, and this is one of them. In the second year of the tag, sit out the whole season.
You're right, Mike. I mean, this is one of the biggest weapons players have. This is really one of the only things they can really fight back with against this, and that's why I hate it because, you know, I can just picture the owners in the meeting rooms when they're trying to figure out the CBA. They know that players want to play football. That's what they've done their whole life. And they're betting in these type of scenarios with a Demarcus Lawrence that at the end of the day, he's going to go, gosh, I want to be loyal to the guys in my locker room. I want to play with my friends. These are my guys. I want to be there in battle with them. And I love playing football. And they feel like, I think the owners set this up to where they thought players would buckle in these type of situations. But what we've seen, and you and I have talked about, this continuing growth on the business side from players and them handling these situations maybe with more business savvy than we've ever seen before, where players are aware of these tools and the things that owners are doing, trying to stop them from getting long-term guaranteed money. So I'm all for what Demarcus Lawrence is doing. I love that he's not getting the surgery first. Don't get yourself prepared for a team that's not going to give any long-term security to you. That's for sure. Take your time. Do what's right. Go get a second opinion. Get a third one if that's what you want to do. But either way, the Dallas Cowboys need to find something here because Demarcus Lawrence, hey, he's one of the best defensive ends in all of football. He's a difference maker, and we know that defense, it relies on that front four very heavily to carry the load for not only the defense but the football team in general.
And let's look at this bigger picture. And it may be that the next CBA gets done before players can really demonstrate to the owners how bad the franchise tag can be for teams. But the franchise tag is not going to go away until the owners want it to go away. And and this is where there's strength in numbers, if every player out there would come together under the umbrella of the NFLPA and agree that if I get franchise tagged, none of us are showing up until Labor Day weekend like Le'Veon Bell did in 2017. I'm not showing up. Right. We're not going to be around. We're going to exercise our full rights. We're not going to sign the tender. Now, there is a risk they rescind the tender, but if you get everybody on the same page, it's kind of like a mini strike. Like all the guys who are franchise tagged come together every year and say, we are not showing up until Labor Day weekend. We're going to demonstrate that this franchise tag needs to go. That's what you do year one. Year two, they all agree we're going to sit out the entire year. I mean, that's the way to push back against it. And for the guys who do play year to year, look at what Kirk Cousins proved. Look at Trumaine Johnson. You go year to year under the tag, you get to the third tag, you're more likely to get to the market. The more that players are willing to say, I don't want a long-term deal, I want to play this out, I want to take advantage of all rights I have under the franchise tag, that's the way to demonstrate to the owners that maybe they need to rethink this thing. Yeah. Maybe there will be some flaws there that need to be addressed. And I think that the players have far more power than they realize. It's one thing for media and fans and players to say the franchise tag stinks. It's another thing to identify key ways you can turn the tables on the owners with the franchise tag, and I think the players are starting to figure it out, Chris.
I do too. I mean, it goes back to what I was just saying. The business savvy aspect that the players are starting to show, I really do like it. Now, hey, we talked about the tool of, yeah, sure, you can sit out the year if you're in the situation like Demarcus Lawrence and do that. But, on the other side, we're gambling, all right, like Kirk Cousins did, and trying to maximize 2-3 years in a row with the franchise tag, all that. Hey, that's risk reward. You got to balance that out. And, hey, quarterbacks might be able to do that a little bit more than some of the other positions in football, especially with the rules right now set up to where the quarterback can't be hit like the old days. But that's different than defensive end, and that's where I think they got to be careful. Just take it from me, a guy who I was never franchised, I was never in that category, but I got tendered, and I had just come off as being the starting quarterback who led his team to a playoff game, and I probably could have made a stink or held out for more money that was more, inclusive as far as to what starting quarterbacks were making at a year time. But I said, you know what? I'll be the good guy. I'll just take the tender. I was tendered as a first and third round draft pick. I'll take my money. I believe at the time it was like $2.3 million. And I said, I'll be the good soldier. Well, you know what happened 4 weeks later? I lose my spleen. I never maximize what I could have got in that situation. And those are the things you have to worry about if you do play with the franchise tag. You have to take that risk reward into account.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.